Hello and great to see you all at this very special Oxygen XML live event. My name is Alim Belu, and as usual, I will be your host for today's live broadcast to celebrate the release of version 23.1 of the Oxygen XML suite of products, an event that took place earlier this month. We basically gathered a part of our Avengers that are responsible for creating and developing the Oxygen products whole year round. And so we gathered them in this panel to tell you how this release builds upon the always expanding suite of our products and to address your questions that you may have about some of these features. Now, this panel brings together Alex Gitiano, Development Lead for Oxygen XML Editor, Octaviano Dolu, Project Manager for Oxygen XML Developer, Christian Talo, Project Manager for Oxygen WebAuthor and our collaborative platform, Oxygen Content Fusion, Alim Balasha, Senior Software Developer from the team responsible for creating Oxygen WebHelp and Oxygen Feedback, and Julian Lecor, Senior Software Developer from the team developing Oxygen Publishing Engine, Oxygen PDF Chemistry, and Oxygen Styles Basket, along with George Bina, Managing Director and one of the co-founders of Syncrosoft, the company that develops the Oxygen suite of products. Now, before we start this event, as always, I will give you the following information. As always, all our events are being recorded, so today's event makes no difference. After the webinar comes to an end, the recording will be made available on the event page on our site, oxygenxml.com, along with the slides and samples of our presenters. And also the recording will be available on our YouTube channel, Oxygen XML. And another important aspect is that as we go along, we encourage you to ask questions by using the questions panel from the GoToWebinar interface. So we can try and answer to most of your questions in real time. But that's it with my intro. Let's go to George Bina.
Hello everyone. Hi Aline. Thank you for introducing us. It is great to be able to give you an overview of our Oxygen 23.1 release, along with the release of a couple of other products that we offer now, because along the years we developed a lot around the core XML editing provided by Oxygen XML Editor. We cover XML development with the Oxygen XML Developer product, XML authoring with Oxygen XML Author, and Oxygen XML Editor remained as an all-in-one XML development and authoring tool. On the XML collaboration and review side, we have the Oxygen XML WebAuthor and the Content Fusion collaboration platform. For XML-based publishing, we provide an Oxygen Publishing Engine, which includes the Oxygen PDF Chemistry and the Oxygen XML WebHelp. Then we have also a solution to gather feedback with the Oxygen Feedback platform. We also extended a bit in the support for automating a number of tasks with the Oxygen scripting. And we also provide a comprehensive API to allow you to include a lot of the Oxygen XML technology into your own products, or to extend the functionality that you have in our products. So we will try to cover the updates on all these parts that we provide. And I always think that the best person to talk about something is somebody that was directly involved in creating that. So we introduced this idea with a similar panel for Oxygen 23.0, and now we have a number of our colleagues again present to share with you what is new on the corresponding part that they've been working on or they coordinated. So let's start with my colleague Christian Tello to see what's new on the collaboration side in Oxygen WebAuthor and Content Fusion mainly. Hi, Christy.
Hello again, the third time, everyone. I am Christian Tarot, the project manager of Oxygen's web-based collaboration tools, which are WebAuthor and Content Fusion. Today, I will talk about the new versions of these products, which were released together with the 23.1 release of Oxygen. The release includes WebAuthor version 23.1 and Content Fusion version 4.0. The most interesting features that we added in this release for Content Fusion are the localization support, the ability to customize the authoring experience based on the user role, and support for concurrent editing. For WebAuthor, we worked a lot to improve the concurrent editing support and its API so that it can be integrated with any CMS. And we also added support for framework extension scripts, which are making the extension of existing scripts and creating new of existing frameworks and creating new frameworks much easier than before. And I will also talk a bit about the SDK that can be used to customize our XML editors. So regarding localization, Content Fusion's content editor, which is the same as in WebAuthor, used to support many languages, which features like spell checking in multiple languages, input methods for languages with non-Latin letters, and bidirectional text support. Now the Content Fusion user interface was localized in 5 more languages, which are French, German, Japanese, and Dutch and Chinese. Another useful feature is that WebAuthor plugins that are installed in Content Fusion now have access to the user role in a particular task. So the plugins can offer a tailored authoring experience based on the user role. For example, a plugin can restrict the reviewer's editing actions to only edit comments. The most exciting feature that we added in Content Fusion 4.0 is the support for concurrent editing. Before this release, when a reviewer opened a document, the document was locked and other reviewers could only edit that file when the first reviewer either left the document or was idle for more than 2 minutes. While this was sufficient in some cases, some collaboration scenarios involved having multiple reviewers opening the file at the same time and seeing each other's changes. Now, in the new version of Content Fusion 4.0, it is possible to enable concurrent editing for each task from the web user interface. The concurrent editing support is inherited from the editing components that is WebAuthor. In WebAuthor, we put a lot of work in improving concurrent editing. The first thing we improved is performance. Before this release, there was a trade-off in enabling concurrent editing, because enabling concurrent editing needs more complex data structures. It also needs more CPU and memory. Although there is no noticeable increase in latency that is perceived by the user, this is still a trade-off to to make, because most of the time, even if we enable concurrent editing, there is a single active user, especially for data projects where topics are small. The chance that two people edit at the same time, it's usually small. Now we improved the performance for the case when there is a single active user, such that there is no performance penalty in enabling concurrent editing. So this makes the life of an integrator easier, because there is no trade-off to make whether to enable or not concurrent editing. Another thing that we work a lot is improving the concurrent editing stability. Right now, it is still in beta, because even if we use it internally and we don't have problems, we don't notice problems while using concurrent editing, our QA can still break it. And we want to make a release in which we address all the issues that our QA team can find with a concurrent editing feature. There will also be an API for custom actions, because a custom action sometimes also needs to be aware that the document is concurrently edited by other people. For example, imagine an action that shows a table properties dialog that allows you to, let's say, change the alignment of a particular column, or change the borders of a row. But while you have this dialog open and you change the settings, a collaborator deletes the entire table. The result may be expected or may not be. It depends on whether the implementer of that custom action wrote the code defensively or not. Another thing that we improved is the user experience for creating a concurrent editing session. Currently in WebAuthor, the concurrent editing feature is exposed as a feature called shared editing session. As the user experience, it goes like this: a user, which we call the owner of the editing session, shares her editing session with others, and only the owner can check the content out of the CMS, save it, and check the content in. Other users are invited to join the existing editing session and cannot save the content. This is a very easy way to integrate with CMSs, because from the point of view of the CMS, there is a single user that edits a file and saves the changes to that file, which is the owner. On the other hand, the user experience is not ideal. The owner of the session has to do some manual steps in order to create a collaborative editing session. The API that we have also allows a seamless user interface for concurrent editing, which means a user just opens a document and starts to see changes made by other people in real time. To implement this seamless user experience, the CMS has to use a new API, which means that the CMS should listen when edits happen in a concurrent editing session. The API term we use for that is room, and each concurrent editing room has an observer, and the CMS should subscribe to the observer to be notified when edits happen. And after an edit happens, let's say if after a couple of seconds, an autosave functionality tries to pull the changes from the concurrent editing room. And the CMS will ask the observer to provide batches of changes made by each of the peers in the concurrent editing room. This API is smart in the way that if in the past 5 seconds, 2 users made changes in different parts of the document, let's say the 2 users inserted some word, instead of providing a letter from the first user, then a letter from the second one, and then a letter from the first user and a letter from the second one, the changes are grouped by user, even though they are interleaved in time. This new API can be used by a CMS, but there are some design decisions to make. For example, some CMSs need the document to be checked out before being edited. Now it's time to ask which user has to check out the document. Is it the first user that enters the concurrent editing room? Is it a special user? Does the CMS want to avoid checking out documents for concurrent editing session? Maybe they can implement some other workflow. These are open questions that should be answered by a CMS. Also, which user gets to save the changes? Is it the user that checked out the document? Is it another one? What happened when the user that checked out the document logs out, but other users are still editing? The answer to these questions might imply changes in the CMS API and even in the CMS concepts and workflows. To validate this API, we integrated it with Content Fusion inside the review task. Our approach was to use a service account. So the WebAuthor connects to Content Fusion using a single account which is associated with the application instead of being associated with a single user. And this service account is responsible to keep the file locked so that users that do not use concurrent editing are not overwriting the file. And this service account saves the changes on behalf of the user that makes it. So each change is recorded using the author that made that change, but the credentials are those of the service account. This is one way in which this API can be integrated, but CMSs have a lot of flexibility in answering the previous questions, the previous design decisions. Another interesting feature that was added for WebAuthor is the support for framework editing scripts. For example, if you want to customize the data framework, before you had to use a graphical user interface composed of several dialogues in which you could add actions to the toolbar. Now we created a human readable configuration file, which we call framework extension script and has the extension EXF. And the nice things about this new configuration file is that it can be stored in a Git repository and have meaningful diffs. So you can, when you add something to the customization, you can explore the history of the project to see more context about that change. This configuration script is robust to changes in the base framework. Basically, if you look in the example on the right, it says that it is an extension of the data framework, and to the data toolbar, I add a separator and 2 actions. And if the base framework decides to add or remove one of the built-in actions, this script will still work. The 2 actions that I want to add are still added. Another nice thing is that as a framework customizer, you are more productive to write this file than using the GUI dialogues. For example, for defining actions, there were a cascade of two dialogues, and you have to switch several tabs. And now, for example, if you want to duplicate an action and change just some parameter, you can use copy paste in a text editor. And the Oxygen XML editor supports compiling this extension framework scripts on the fly, so that you can make a change in the script and then reload a data file, and you see the new framework being applied. This framework extension script is basically an engine that transforms a base framework in a customized one. It can also be used to create frameworks from scratch. If you don't have an input framework, you just add actions, for example, to an empty toolbar, and that's how you construct your extension framework. The last part of my presentation is about the Oxygen SDK, which is a set of Maven artifacts that have a Java API. They can be used to create frameworks for our editors, which are Oxygen XML Author and Oxygen XML Editor as desktop applications, and Oxygen XML WebAuthor and Content Fusion as web applications. You can also implement plugins, and you can also create your own web application that bundles WebAuthor component and configuration, plugins, frameworks, and other customizations. Our SDK is available at no cost for the developer. Though, for example, if you want to create a framework for Oxygen XML editor, let's say, you can register for the SDK and start developing the plugin, and then you can redistribute the framework you can either use it in-house or sell it to your clients, and your clients will only pay the license for the editor. This is the same applies for plugins and for the case when you bundle WebAuthor component. In this case, you give WebAuthor components to your clients, and they have to have a license for the editor in order to use it. But as a developer, there is no associated cost with using the SDK to develop customizations. We have a web page dedicated to the SDK, which is oriented by the goals that you want to achieve. For example, if you want to customize the WebAuthor component or the WebAuthor, or you want to create frameworks and so on. And for example, for WebAuthor, we have a customization guide, which is the starting point for any integration or customization work that one needs to do, and it's structured by use cases. For example, integrated WebAuthor with a user management system, or integrating it in a workflow, or integrated with the content by creating custom frameworks and so on. Yeah, thank you for listening. That was what I wanted to share with you today. And if you have any questions, you can ask them during this presentation or later on our support channels. Now I
see that we have a question. Maybe you can quickly answer this. Is there a way to save the graphical user interface generated framework as an EXF file and then edit it? So is there a round trip so that you can later modify the imported EXF file in the graphical user interface? So how do maybe Alex can provide more insight into that?
Hello for the second time, because I was muted. So that's a very good suggestion for a feature. Right now, we don't offer a tool for importing, for converting from a classic framework to this new format, but until such a tool arrives, you can keep the framework like it is and just extend it with with a script and do all the changes from now on from the script, I would say. If you don't want to manually translate the classic framework into this new script. But it is an interesting idea. I'll I'll note it. I make a note for, and perhaps a new version of Oxygen will bring this feature too.
Thank you, Alex. Maybe, yeah, we can move on probably to the next topic.
Sure, we will go to Octavian Adolu next.
Okay, so Octavian will share a bit on the development side.
Okay, hello everybody. My name is Octavian Adolu, and yes, next we'll see the features that we added on the development part. Our team focuses more on the XML schema and the other type of schemas, development and JSON schemas, validation, and of course XSLT, XQuery, transformation, but also other things. These are the most important, let's say. What we added in this version, so we added this support to ignore validation problems, and now you can ignore any type of validation problem in Oxygen if this validation problem has an ID, and I will show you more later. Then we added the support to generate JSON schema documentation. We finalized this support in this version. This is an add-on, and this is installed automatically when you start to use this generate documentation schema. We added new support for YAML. So we added the YAML editor with syntax highlighting and other actions. We added also improvements on XSLT and XQuery, and some command line scripts for comparing files and directories. So let's go to the first one, which is the ignore validation problems. Here you can ignore any problem that has an ID. So either it's a problem that it's on XML document, or maybe on XQuery or other validation problem. You are now able to ignore it. You can activate or deactivate this feature. You can also show or hide these problems, or you can ignore and unignore a problem. So you can remove it from the ignoring list. And you can also ignore schematron validation problems by adding IDs to the asset or report. And I'll show you some examples to see how you can do this. So I'll switch to Oxygen. I have here an XML document. So we have some problems here. There are warnings and information. And now if you go on a problem, you can click this quick fix button that will allow you to solve the problem, but also to ignore it. So you can ignore it in this document, and you can ignore only this problem based on the error message and the type of message, or you the type of problem, or you can ignore the type of problem in all your document, or you can ignore in all the documents from your project, for example, or from your editing part, the problems. This support it's activated from options, so by default it's not activated, but you can check this from options, editor, document ignore validation problems, and check this this here to add to enable the support. After you ignore a problem, this will disappear from the editing area, but it will remain here in the left as gray. I'll ignore a new one to have more problems here. So it will remain here gray. It will be presented also here in the status. So you'll see that there are 3 problems that are ignored now. And you can also still run the fixes on the problem just by going here in the range ruler and press F2 to focus on this part of the tooltip, and then here you are able to fix the problem, but also remove this problem from the ignored list to see it in the editor. These problems are presented also when you are running the validation and see the results view. Also here, these are presented with gray, and you can also remove a problem from the ignored list here. You can hide the problems, or you can ignore the problems. So here you can ignore a batch set. So you can select multiple problems and say, okay, I want to ignore all these problems from my file, and then you'll not see here. And you can enable, disable this support here to see or hide these problems. Okay, then as I told you, you can apply this ignore support also on other type of validation. So here I have a validation with a relaxing G schema, and I have some problems. So I can ignore also this type of problems. I can go here and say, okay, I want to ignore this problem in the document, and it will mark with gray. And you'll see still see the problem here. You'll still see the problems in the range ruler, but in the editor will be hidden. This support is available also for batch validation. So if you select multiple files or directory from the project and run a validation, you'll see in the results the problems that are ignored. And you can ignore also problems directly from here by using these actions, but you can also show or hide the ignored problems and focus on the ones that are important for you. So this is a feature that was addressed by a lot of our users, and I think it will be a useful one. Then let's go to the next one, the JSON schema documentation. We've finalized this support to generate documentation for JSON schema. What we added in this version, we added this support to select the components that you want to include in the documentation, such as the properties or the definition or the source code. So you can filter the information that will be added in the documentation. You can split the HTML files in multiple documents, in multiple HTML files. by selecting splitting by components or splitting by the JSON schema that you are generating for, and I'll show you some examples. Then we added also syntax highlighting in the source code. Here in the generated documentation is the syntax highlighting that we use in Oxygen. So if you change these colors in Oxygen, it will be then updated also in the documentation when you are generating it. And we added this location for the JSON schema. So let's switch to Oxygen to show you some examples here. I'll close this first. And I have here some JSON schemas. I have a big JSON schema with UBL schema with a lot of other schema that are referred from this one. And I can use this action from here, generate documentation. Now I have the add-on installed, but when you click for the first time, it will ask to install it, and you just need to click next, and it will be installed. So now here you can specify the output file. Let's say we want to output it in a separate folders called doc. And then you can choose to split the documentation in multiple files, and you can choose to split it by components or by location, by the schema location. Then you can choose the information that will be added in the generated schema. And for example, I'll choose also to add the location of the schema in the documentation. Then you hit generate, and a progress it's presented with the generated content. And when this progress is finished, documentation is opened, and we see that we have a big documentation here. We have here in the left all the JSON schemas that are referred from the one that I generated for. You can click on each of these to see the documentation. You have, as I told you, this syntax highlighting. You have this location of the schema, which is very nice because you can add the schema, the source schema near the documentation, and someone can go to check it. And if you copy this location from here and then open the location in Oxygen, we added also the link that takes you to the exactly location where this reference is, this definition was made. So this is very useful also for this part. Okay, next. On the XSLT and XQuery, we also added some improvements. We added this support to profile, style sheets, and XQuery documents using the Saxon support. So maybe it's more easily for you to use the Saxon support, and maybe for when you have big XSLT files or XQuery, maybe it is more easy to use this profiling support that Saxon provides. And we added some improvements in the WE to allow to do this directly from Oxygen. And we also improved the XSLT 3.0 support. We worked a little bit on the XSLT package support, and we'll continue to work on this. Let's go to see an example for this general documentation. So now you can, if you have a style sheet, for example, such as this one, you can use a transformation scenario. I already created one, but what you need to do, you need to go here in the Saxon options and enable this profiling support, and set the location where you want to save the report. Then you can go also here in the output and specify to open this location when the transformation is finished. So you can open the profiling instead of the results of the transformation. And then if I apply this scenario, the profiling is run, and automatically I see the results here with the style sheet and with each template and function that I have in the style sheet and the time. So I can easily go to improve the speed here in Oxygen and then just run again the transformation and see if something happens. So it's very easy to improve your style sheets now, and just by running this transformation from Oxygen and see the result. Similarly for XQuery, I have here a simple XQuery. You can create a transformation scenario. You need to set also in the Saxon options this enable profiling, set a location where the profile is saved. And here in the output, you need to make sure that you do not set this present as sequence. So this present as sequence must be unchecked. And then you can also open the location where the profile is saved. So you can add this location here where you saved the result. And then if I run this, I'll see similarly a report for XQuery. Then we also added this YAML editor. We added syntax highlighting for YAML. We added the validation accordingly to the YAML specification. You can also batch validate the contents of the YAML files. And then you can, we added the support to automatically indent when you insert new content in YAML to format and make sure that your document is formatted correctly and without breaking the structure of the YAML document. And also some tools to convert from YAML to JSON and back. I'll show you a simple example here. So I have here a YAML file. So now when you are editing a document, a YAML document, you'll see that you'll have the syntax highlighting. You can easily type enter in any place and automatically it will set the indentation to type correctly the content. Then if the document is not well formed, like, such as this one, I can use this pretty print action and automatically will make it well formed. If you make validation errors in your document, for example, I duplicate a key, it will automatically tell me that this is not correct and I need to remove it. Or if I remove some content here and the document will not be correct, it will notify me that I need to check the content. Also, here in the tools, for the batch converter and also for in the JSON tools, you have this support to convert from YAML to JSON and from JSON to YAML. So I can convert, for example, this file to JSON and it will look something like this. So it's the same information but in JSON format, and I can convert it back JSON to YAML, and I'll set here a different name, say person2, and it will I will have the same content that I had initially. So we'll still develop this support for YAML, and I'll tell you what we intend to do next. Okay, next, the compare scripts. So now we added in the scripting part 2 new scripts for compare directories and compare files. These are using this scripting support. It uses a different license from Oxygen, so it's a different component, and allows you to compare two directories and save the results in different formats. And you have a lot of options to ignore different files, or if you are if you are comparing XML documents, you can also use options to ignore comments or processing instruction from your documents. I will show you a simple example. I have here a command line. So in the compare directories, you can type now this help, and you can see all the options that we provide for Oxygen for these compare directories. And let's compare two directories here that I added in Oxygen. So I have one is this one, and one is this reviewed, flowers reviewed. If I type enter, I will get all the changes that are made in the file, and then I can choose, for example, to output this in a different format. I can choose to output it like an XML. Let's say I want to now it's a JSON format. I will say XML, and let's say I want to be a raw format, and type enter. I didn't type correctly. Let's get JSON. JSON and row. No, I misspelled something. Anyway, so you can get all the information about the compare files and the compare directors here in our user manual, with all the options that we provide, with the support to include archives or to exclude different files, the algorithms that can be used, and the support to ignore some of the content.
You basically needed a minus out parameter, probably, but never mind.
Probably yes, minus out, yes. I forgot about minus out. It's better this time. Thank you, George. Okay, so for the compare files, it's a similar support. It allows you to compare two files this time, and it will output the location of the changes, the offsets from the files. You can also output this result in a YAML, JSON, or XML format, and you have also the support to ignore different content. It's the same support that we provide in the Oxygen interface. And I will show you an example also for this one. So I'll type here compare files, and then I think I have here two files, one and another, and if I type enter, then it will bring me all the changes that are in these files, and this, you see that are a lot of changes. There are 21, and I can decide, for example, to ignore some of the changes, and I'll say, okay, I want to ignore the text nodes from this document, and I'll get only 4 changes this time. These are the structure changes from the file. So you have different options also for comparing files. You can also check this in our user manual, and you can try to play with them. So these are the most important features. There are a lot of other issues that we solve in this version, such as bug fixes or small features that will not presented here. Next, I'll tell you more about the future plans. We intend to add support to edit visually the JSON schema, a JSON schema diagram. We also intend to add validation for YAML documents using a schema, using a JSON or YAML schema. Also, we want to improve the XSLT 3.0 support for packaging and other support that we offer in Oxygen. We work also on the schematron and SQF improvements, and we intend to improve also the scripting part by adding the three-way and maybe the merge support, and we have also a lot of plans. So we wait also for your feedback, and in case you like one of our features and you want to be implemented, you can also type it now in the questions panel, and we'll add it in our issue to like a +1, you know. So this is what I want to tell you on the development part. If there are questions now, maybe we can take some of them, or
yes,
we
maybe
can go further.
We can let's try to quickly answer some of them. Or provide some clarification, because I already answered most of them. So question was, it is possible for an information architect to control which rules can be or cannot be ignored by a writer. So back to the ignore support for validation issues.
No, right now the support can be activated or deactivated. Maybe you can activate it on a project, but yeah, maybe it's a good idea to have this support maybe activated for let's say information problems or for warnings. Yeah.
So my answer was also that basically the ignore rules are part of the options, and those options can be set at the project level. So you can basically share some of the ignore things with others, or you can disable the support for ignoring problems if you don't want people to ignore things. And a follow-up was if these options can be imposed with the impose options SDK API, and the answer is yes, because there are options as any other options in Oxygen. But we do not have here a list that will say this type of warning or error message cannot be ignored. We do not have that.
The good part for schematron, for example, is that if you have an ID set on the assert or report, then that rule can be ignored. If you do not set an ID, then you'll not be this rule will not be ignored. So, in case if it's the case of the schematron, then this can be controlled. So if you set this ID here, this means that Oxygen will allow you to ignore this problem. If you do not set an ID, Oxygen will not.
It was also a comment from one of the attendees that exactly with this remark, that for schematron, if you do not set an ID, then you cannot ignore that if the issue does not have an ID. And an interesting question was when this is useful, when this is helpful. And one possibility is with schematron, if you have some warning that maybe does not make sense for your case, but you have 100 such occurrences, then you cannot basically continue to work on your actual things or to see actual relevant issues, and you may want to turn that off. It just turns it off visually, because you can still see that in as grayed out, or of course you can decide to hide that if you want.
Yes, this ignoring it's more like a hiding. You know, you'll still see that this document has problems, even if you hide all the problems. You'll still see here in the results that okay, your document it contains errors, you know, but are ignored. So in this case, if you do
feature basically.
Yes.
Thanks for the profiling support. There's a question. We used to use a configuration file for this, and which of these settings will we use, a configuration file or this -tp option that you have now?
You can also use a configuration file. What we did, it's adding this in interface and make it more easy for you to generate. And we intend also to add maybe a scenario for to make it more easily. Just create a profiling scenario and have all this information set in the scenario without needing to set all these options in the transformation scenario.
Another question was if the diff can be used also, or that command line, when you compare a directory with a comma separated value or XML file that contains what was expected in that directory. And the answer is no, that's not something that this tool provide. It may be something to think about in the future. Yes.
Yes.
Are any plans to support for better support for XProc 3.0?
Yes, we have plans. We still wait for Norman Walsh to release the XProc 3.0 support because we integrate the Calabash plugin, and right now maybe we can add some support on the editing part, but I don't know about the validation and transformation.
Yeah, and the last question was about having a what you see, what you get like editor for XSL FO style sheets. And Oxygen does actually provide an author view. Not sure if that covers all your use cases, but if you find that can be improved in the future. We also have inline actions or form controls that may allow to control different things. So if you have some specific use cases, share them with us, and if it makes sense, we can improve that that support. So I think that's it. We can move on. Thank you, Octavian, and thank you, Christy.
Thank you.
Forgot to mention that. So let's continue on the authoring side. I will invite Alex then to share some of that with us.
Thank you, George. Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending this webinar. So let's pick it up from where my colleague Octavian left us, and that's Oxygen scripting. These features that we've extracted out of Oxygen so you can enhance your continuous integration pipelines. One such interesting feature was XML refactoring. Up until recently, this feature was available only in the graphical user interface. And you get this dialog here that presents a set of predefined operations that can be performed on XML documents. And they're very powerful and quite a few of them. You are able to change an attribute value or maybe convert between attributes and elements and much more than that. So what you can do now, starting from Oxygen 23.1, is to invoke such operations from the command line using the XML refactoring script. You just pass it an operation ID and the set of files on which you want it to be performed. Each of these operations are described by an XML descriptor file. And if you look inside this descriptor file, then you will find this operation ID that you need to specify here. Another command line tool is the batch converter. We released it in the previous version, but now it received a couple of improvements, more noteworthy. It would be the fact that when you convert from Markdown to data, you can choose to create short description elements out of the first paragraphs from the Markdown files. Short descriptions are very important and useful concept in data, so it makes sense to put them in the Markdown files as well. Also, when you convert from HTML to data, you can choose to split to convert sections from that HTML into separate topics. And these two behaviors are controlled through two new parameters that you can pass to the command line tool. In case you're not familiar with this, in order to gain access to these scripts, you need to download an Oxygen All Platforms distributions, and you will find all of them in the scripts directory. Please note that a special scripting license is required if you want to use them. Another interesting feature in this version is the SharePoint integration, which was redesigned for better consistency and productivity. We support authentication through the Open Authentication Protocol, and also the SharePoint browser has gained some actions to quickly connect to a SharePoint server. So this here on the bottom is the SharePoint browser. You can access it from Windows, Show View, and SharePoint browser is here. And these are the quick actions that enable you to create a new SharePoint online connection. In my case, I have one already set up. So all I have to do is log in. I'll be redirected to the browser where I will accomplish the sign in procedure. And afterwards, I return to Oxygen and I'm logged in. I can browse the resources. I can open documents, I can check them out and make changes. And when I check them back in, they'll have a new version here. Okay. CSS variables, also known as custom CSS properties, are properties defined in CSS by authors, by those that write the CSS, and contain specific values. I have here a small example. You see here on an ancestor, I define such a CSS variable named main background color. And in any descendant, I can use it like this, using the var function. And this var function only supports another signature in which you can provide a default value in case this main background color it doesn't exist in the current context. And these CSS variables are important because they empower reuse. As you imagine, complex CSS applications have a lot of rules, so you tend to duplicate content in them, and that's not a good idea, of course, because maintaining and changing these CSSs becomes a lot harder. Also, another interesting feature is that you gain semantics. A color with this code here on the right, it might not say much, but by binding it to a variable that's named main background color, then it has a semantics, and I know when I'm using it that this is the background color that I should be using. And we now support CSS variables in Oxygen. Of course, in the CSS editor, you can write such constructions and you won't receive any errors. We'll recognize them. and render them as such. And also, if as you know, the author mode, the visual editing mode in Oxygen, is powered by CSS rules. So all the rendering and layout is controlled by CSS rules. And now you can put CSS variables and use them in these CSS files. And the author mode will know how to handle them. And also the Oxygen XML WebAuthor supports these CSS variables. Now, just in case my colleague Christian didn't fully convince you on how great these framework extension scripts are, I have two more benefits for you. As he mentioned, they can be compiled into a .framework file, and you can do that using an action available in the editor contextual menu, but we also have a script. And I think that's great because you can keep this script file, and maybe in your continuous integration pipelines, you just apply this script and you get the .framework file to distribute. And also, quite important, up until now, Oxygen supported framework extensions. So you were able to start from an existing framework like Dita and extend it to make changes and create a new framework. And this was done in the graphical user interface. But there was a limitation. You could only do this on one level. So once you've extended, I extended the Dita framework into a, let's say, lightweight Dita, I wasn't able to extend the lightweight Dita again into another framework. And we handle this use case with the framework extension script, which works on multiple levels. So you can have an A framework that extends a B framework, that extends a C framework, and so on and so forth. Project templates are also a cool feature. We added it in Oxygen 23, I think. The idea is that a project has a structure. For example, if we talk about a Dita project, you probably have some folders in which you put your warehouse topics, and maybe your filters sit in another folder. And also perhaps you set specific options in Oxygen and you want them to have specific values, and for that you save all these options at project level. So what you can create now, you can create these project templates, which are basically a zip archive that bundle all these resources, all this structure together with a setup project file. And next, if you place, next to this project file, you can place a properties file it has the same name. It must have the same name as the project file, the project template file. And this file contains metadata that Oxygen knows how to read and interpret. For example, you can put human readable name or label for this project templates. And what we added in Oxygen 23.1 is the ability to specify in this metadata file a set of documents in which you've used editor variables and you want them expanded when you create a new project using these project templates. So you have a filter that tells us which resources to expand, and another one that tells us which resources to exclude in case they are somehow included by the previous filter. Obviously, framework files or these framework extension scripts are such resources in which we shouldn't expand editor variables. So a quick demonstration. If you go to Oxygen to project, new project, you will notice these new templates. So we ship a default project as well as two startup points for data projects. And I have here as a demonstration another project template, this new project. And if I click create, oops. So I have it here, and it has, it has this include filter and a data map. So it should expand all editor variables in my data map. So project, new project. Oops. Yes, so it's the live demo effect. But what should have happened is a dialog should have appeared and asked me for the title of the data map, because my data map contains an ask editor variable. But moving forward, a few words about add-ons. So add-ons are functionalities that we've decided to implement separately from Oxygen, so they can have a different release cycle. We can release it more often than we do with Oxygen. And to install these add-ons in Oxygen, you have to go to Help, Install New Add-ons, and just select the default or all available sites, and afterwards you'll see everything that all the add-ons that are compatible with the current Oxygen version. But now I want to mention just a few of them. So first of all, the Git client. So it's a client for Git embedded in Oxygen. Was released and received quite a few improvements, and actually in a week or two we're preparing a new version release for it. As again, the batch converter add-on again was released. It's actually the batch converter script. It's based on the functionality provided by this add-on. And for those of you that use XSpec to write unit tests for XSLTs, it's probably good to know that we have an add-on. It's called the XSpec helper view, and we released a new version for it, which comes bundled with the new XSpec version, that's 207. So this add-on contributes a side view in which you can see all the scenarios from the XSpec files. You can run them individually or all of them and see which one fail, and a lot more. As a bonus, the XML refactoring gained a new action to generate unique IDs for specified elements. You can access it from Tools, XML Refactoring, or directly from a data map. If you have a data map opened, you have here a refactoring submenu, and then the generate IDs here action. You can specify the elements for which you want to generate IDs, pattern for the IDs, and there's also a nice preview in which you can see all the affected resources and for which elements the ID was generated. Also, there's handy action you might not be aware of. It's called Switch Editor tab. It's accessible using Control F9, and it gained a recently closed files section here on the bottom. So you can more easily reopen a file that you've closed beforehand. Thank you very much for bearing with me, and stay tuned because my colleagues have quite a few more features in their bag.
Thank you, Alex.
Do you have questions?
I do not see questions right now, but feel free to add. Oh, here we have one. How does that pattern work for generating IDs? So about the refactoring action, I think.
Oops. So you see here it uses some editor variables, we call them. So this local name, we know we will expand it to the local name of the element in question. The ID, we generate a unique ID out of it, and you can put other. You can change the pattern as you see fit, and you can also look in our user guide and see what other editor variable we support.
Yeah, so but usually we try to follow the same pattern as the generate ID functionality from Oxygen the author mode, I think, right?
Right, yes, because we have an action here. If I open a document, there's a generate ID here.
Another question related is whether UUIDs are an option, universal user IDs.
We might have an editor variable for that, I think.
Does the generate ID refactoring function honors overrides from SDK? Can we just use the SDK to add our editor variables?
Yes, so we have extension points in the SDK for controlling the ID generations. You can also define these patterns that George mentioned at framework level. The XML refactoring operation that I've presented is a useful tool for those cases in which you've realized that for a couple of weeks or months or years you've used a pattern that was not very inspired, and you now want to make changes and bring all those IDs to the new pattern.
Also, another interesting part is that basically to support this, we implemented like an extension function, XSLT extension function that is used from this refactoring operation. And then you can use this actually in other refactoring operations.
Yes, actually all these operations, yes, all these operations have under the hood an XSLT or an XQuery update script. And you can enhance them, extend them, change them as you see fit, or use them in other contexts like George mentioned. But the XML refactoring engine does a bit of special things. It helps you with entities in case your documents contain entities. We know how to keep those entities, because an XSLT processing by default will expand those entities. We also take care to keep the doc type as it is. An XSLT might lose it. And yes, to answer the universal unique identifier question, we do have an editor variable. It's called UUID that you can use in the pattern.
Thank you, Alex. And
Thank you.
let's move on the feedback and a bit on the publishing side with my colleague Aline Balasha. Hello, Aline.
Thank you, George. Hello, everyone. So I want to highlight the new improvements and the new features we have added to Oxygen WebHelp and Oxygen Feedback. I will start with Oxygen Feedback, which reached its 1.4 version. Amongst others, in this version, you can link comments with specific content from your HTML page. You can filter the comments available on the current page. Also, you have more options to choose from when configuring the email notifications settings. And if you choose to use the Enterprise Edition of Oxygen Feedback, you can now control the display name and add other various branding aspects of your installation. So the main addition in this version is the block level comments feature, which allows you to add comments at a specific location within the HTML page. This means that the feedback is more precise and it's easier to locate the exact content referenced in the comments. By design, this feature is available on block elements that have an ID associated in the data source. Regarding this, Oxygen offers several methods to automatically generate IDs on specific data elements. My colleague Alex mentioned them. You can use the dedicated refactoring operation or the editing support from Oxygen Author mode. You can also use WebHelp's feature that allows you generate IDs on the fly directly in the HTML output at the transformation time. The disadvantage of this approach is that the generated IDs are not persistent between two subsequent transformation. So, the associated comments will lose their context. If you choose to generate IDs directly in the data source, the IDs will be persistent between transformations, and the comments will keep their reference to the context content. Let me switch to HTML page to show you an overview of this feature. So I have here a sample WebHelp page. If you hover a certain section, a certain element, you can add a new comment clicking on the add button. I'll have to log in first. So you can enter your comment here. Let's say test, and add it. My comment is displayed, and the status of this section is updated, showing me that one comment is available on this paragraph. So as you can see, you can easily spot the elements which have comments associated. There is a comment widget which has an label associated stating the numbers of comments available. This feature is also integrated in the Oxygen feedback plugin. If you, sorry, oh, if you click on a comment that was added in a specific context, the associated topic is opened and that section is highlighted. Moving on, another feature that we added in this version is the comments filtering support. You can filter comments in the commenting component at the bottom of the output page. You can, let me switch back to the WebHelp page. So in the header of the comment component, you can find this drop-down button, which allows you to filter the comments displayed in the page by their status. So you have you can choose between not resolved comments, which include the comments that have not yet been approved by moderated, and the comments that are still open, so a resolution was not provided for them. You can also choose to display the comments that are waiting for approval, or you can choose to display all the comments available based on your user rights in the current site. The not resolved filter is the default value. When you choose between one of these values, your option is persistent, and it also applies on the existing block level comments throughout the page. So if you change the filter, you can see that the block level comments are also updated. Moving forward, you now have more options for configuring the notification that you will receive when certain events are triggered. You can choose to configure two types of notification settings. The notification settings are available in the profile page, so I'll go there. You can configure a global notification scheme that applies to all your sites or to all the sites you have interacted with, and you can choose to add a notification scheme on a specific sites. So you can choose the one of the sites from this drop down and click add a scheme. Now a new notification scheme is displayed, and the sections which are available are based on your user permission on this site. So if you choose to choose a site where you have less permissions, only that section is available. Moving on, if you choose to use the enterprise edition of Oxygen feedback, you are now allowed to change various branding properties of your installation. You can choose to change the name of the application, which is rendered throughout the application. You can change the logo and favicon images. You can choose to provide custom links for terms and condition and privacy policy. These settings can be configured using a properties file, and as you can see in this image, I changed the name of the application and the logo associated with the application, so the comments component available in the HTML pages was updated to render those values. These are the main changes we made to Oxygen feedback. Now let's move on to Oxygen WebHelp. In the new version, besides various maintenance fixes and improvements, these are the addition in this release. There were some improvements on the HTML fragment support. We added a new component. You are now you have the possibility to disable our embedded search engine, and you can provide your custom implementation for it. New styles were added for notes and hazard statements. As you may know, the HTML fragments support is one of the main methods of customizing the WebHelp responsive output. Until now, the requirement for a contributed HTML fragment was that it needed to be XML well form in order to be copied in the output. As of this version, Oxygen WebHelp provides a mechanism that automatically converts such fragments to well-formed XML. This feature is enabled by default, but it can be deactivated. If you choose to disable it and you provide an HTML fragment that is not XML well-formed, the transformation will fail. Besides this conversion feature, additional HTML fragment placeholders were added, so you are now able to add custom HTML content in more places throughout the page. In this version, we also implemented a new component, a new template component. Now you can add a link to an external PDF resource in your topic pages. This component can be configured using a set of parameters, and it is added in the breadcrumb section of the topic page next to the navigation links. You can use this component to add, for example, a link to your PDF version of your documentation. WebHelp also automatically adds the current topic ID to the configured PDF link in order to open the PDF document at that specific section in the document. You can enable or disable this feature by configuring the associated parameter. In this version, you also let user to disable our custom search engine implementation and provide their own implementation. You can integrate your custom search engine using two parameters, one that can be used to provide the script that implements the search engine, and one that can be used to provide the HTML fragment which which defines the section where the search results items will be displayed. And, also in this version, we provide some updates in the styles of the data nodes elements and hazard statements. As you can see, they are more noticeable and they can stand out in the content. This concludes my my feature highlight, and I invite you to ask questions if you haven't done it yet, and I will be happy to answer them.
Thank you,
Thank
Alin.
you.
Yeah, the blog level functionality, it's important, I think, for enabling a better review support, let's say, for database published to WebHelp, because now in the output you can address your comments to specific sections, and then, as Alin presented, you can find those sections in the integration that we have in the Oxygen XML editor and author to find a corresponding content directly in the source. I do not see any questions. But if you have questions, you can still ask them while we have our last semi-section, let's say, from today's webinar. So let's invite also our colleague Julien to show us a bit on the styles basket and PDF chemistry.
So about the PDF publishing part, we have some improvements on the PDF chemistry part, apart from the minor bug fixes. We added, as Alex mentioned before, the support for CSS variables. So if you define any variables into a CSS style sheet, the PDF output will also display them. We also added the support for the font variant numeric CSS property. So let me show you an example. I will use data topics for this part, but as it's on chemistry part, you can do it on XML or HTML file as well. So for this example, I defined already on my side two elements which are marked using some output classes, then a CSS file which defines for each of those marked items some font variant numeric values. So for the example, the first part will be marked as ordinal, so it will be rendered as first, second, with not like this, but in index. And the second part will be displayed using the /0. Of course, when you are using this kind of property, you have to choose and to add in your project some fonts that support these properties. If I go now to my output, you will see that each of the marked element is now rendered using the specific font and the specific variant I indicated. So back to what's new on the chemistry part, we also added the support for the position CSS property. Now you can add position relative for any kind of block elements. This allows you to set the couple of properties which are top, left, bottom, and right to position your block one close to another one. On the improvements, we have added a better rendering for the messages that are displayed when I did a transformation. For example, this topic contains an error, which is normally a warning. So I defined a table with two columns. The first column is defined using a relative width, and the second one uses an absolute width, which is not recommended. And this will lead into my PDF document to something not displayed correctly because my table is bleeding now. And this also leads to a new warning, which explains that the columns are too wide. And the additional information we added in this version is that we indicate the name of the element which has the problem, its location into the .f file, the ID of the element having the same problem, and a part of the text included in this element. These are here to help you finding where is the problem in the PDF document. We also improve PDF chemistry memory footprint for those who are used to transform really huge documents. Normally, you should notice that the process consumes less memory. And we also added some fixes related to especially the Asiatic languages. We added the support for the italic. We added a fallback, which when content is displayed using italic, it's rendered as normal in PDF. And we also added a series of fallback fonts, which are also used in the content of the PDF, also for page margin boxes. And these fallback fonts also includes support for JSK fonts. So, for example, here I have a topic written in Chinese. I added an italic part, and if I go to the generated output, you will see that the italic part is rendered, but as a normal text, so it's no more italicized. And each of my page margins has the same font used as the font used in the content. And I didn't add any font from any CSS file to be rendered correctly. So those were the improvements for PDF chemistry in this 23.1 version. Regarding the data to PDF publishing, the main improvement was the additional support of the SVG syntax diagram data OT plugin, which is available at this address. This plugin allows you to create some syntax diagram data elements like these ones and render them into a PDF file as an SVG syntax diagram file, which is the following one. So this is really easier to read than the one presented in the author mode. And I let in this task, the only steps I did to make it work is that I download it. We recommend the usage of an external Oxygen publishing engine when you are using plugins for the simple reason that if you do an upgrade from one version to Oxygen to another version of Oxygen, you may you may lose the install plugin if you have it in the frameworks folder of Oxygen. So we recommend an external plugin. I simply download it and zip the folder, the content into the plugins folder of my Oxygen publishing engine, sorry. I run the data OT integrator transformation, which is this one. And I simply transform my whole data map, which is this one, to obtain the document, which is here. And the main improvement we did on this release was the new version of the Oxygen Styles basket, which is available at the address styles.oxygenxml.com. Now, Oxygen Styles basket is divided into 4 different sections, which are the branding section, the PDF section, WebHelp section, and the content styling section. When I start to customize any documents, usually I tend to set my company colors, fonts, and logos. So for example, let's select a color and a custom font. For this one, I will take the Segoe UI font. I can next move on to the PDF specific part. And for example, I want to display my results and I want to use the deep numbering in my table of content instead of the classic numbering. You may see that each modification is reflected into the preview of Oxygen Styles basket. I will do the same for the WebHelp output and select a custom breadcrumb and a custom publication talk. Then I will finish my customization with a common styling. So this part applies on both PDF and WebHelp outputs. And for example, I will select the box style for all my tables. As for any other modification, you will see that the tables are modified. When this part is finished, you can see the result on either PDF or WebHelp using the sample that is used on the preview, or I can download the CSS file only, or the whole publishing template, which is what I want to do. Once this part is loaded, so you will see I obtain a CSS file and a publishing template file. I can go back to Oxygen, select a new map. I can duplicate my PDF classic transformation and use the downloaded the downloaded set of styles from my styles basket. You will see a new template appearing in in the template tab. Then I will do the same for the WebHelp responsive output. Exactly as for the PDF, I select my new template, which appears at the beginning. Then once I run both transformations, I will obtain a new PDF, which, as it was visible in the preview side, will have what I selected from the styles basket. So here in my table of contents, the deep numbering, the custom tables, and for my WebHelp part, I will have the custom breadcrumb, the custom publication talk, and the custom tables. And this concludes the publishing part.
Thank you, Julien. We have a question about the styles basket. Is this generating a plugin that can then extend that you can then extend to do more complex customizations?
So as I explained before, the styles basket generates, if you download the whole output, it will generate those 3 files, which contains the previews that are displayed into the transformation dialog. The publishing template referring to this CSS file for all the WebHelp and PDF customization. And if you want to customize furthermore this output, you will need to add your custom CSS, and then, for example, in Oxygen, you can go in Oxygen, open both files, and as you may see, the style CSS is now referred here. If you want to use a bigger file, what I suggest is that you may have to create another CSS style sheet which refers this style sheet. This for the simple reason that if I need to modify it back into the Oxygen styles basket, I need to upload the original file generated by the stylus basket. So if you want to extend this, you will create this one and add an import to the styles.css file. Then you will refer, instead of referring the style.css here, you will refer this new style sheet. But yes,
so
you can.
It's basically a starting point, but it's a starting point for creating what we call sorry, what's the name for this? A publishing template.
Yeah, publishing templates. Yeah, it's the starting point for people who maybe doesn't know quite well how CSS works, and like this, they can have all the, as you may see, all the selected options I used in my styles basket are referred as a comment before the real content of what I generated. So if I selected the color, the blue themes, you will see that in fact this corresponds to this whole display. Then the fonts, extra.
So yeah, it's a starting point, but not for plugins, but for Oxygen publishing templates that you can use to customize the WebHelp and the PDF output done through chemistry.
Yeah, so if you want something more advanced, let's say CSS, advanced CSS work, you will have to create your own style sheet, which simply refers the created style sheet by the Oxygen styles basket generated style sheet.
All right, thank you. And I think we managed to get through all the things that we wanted to share with you. Maybe Aline can provide some closing ideas and some additional information for upcoming events and so on.
Thank you, George. And reaching the end of our event, let me remind people in our audience that the event is being recorded. And as usual, you will find the recording along with our presenters' sample files and slides on the event page that you can see right now. And if you have any comments or questions regarding their presentation, you can write to us directly by using the Oxygen feedback commenting platform that you can see here, found at the bottom of this very same page. Now, about our upcoming events, we will have one in April. On April 14, we will have the Working with Data in Oxygen, customizing the editing experience. And if you joined regularly our events, you should know that this is the 4th episode of our Working with Data in Oxygen series. And in this one, we will explore several ways of customizing the data editing experience according to your desires. So this webinar will cover the customization of author actions, the author mode rendering, document validation, the content completion assistant, and the new document templates. And as always, make sure to check our events page and our social media channels on Twitter or Facebook to be the first ones to find out about our upcoming live tutorials and events. And also on our events page, you can also find the links to register for free. And Before going, let me thank our panelists, the people that constantly innovate Oxygen and make sure that your user experience is unmatched when using our products. So thank you, Christian, Octavian, Alex, Aline, Julian, and George. And of course, a big thank you to the entire Oxygen team for working on this latest release. And as always, the biggest thank you is to you all for attending this event that took a little bit longer to reach its end than usual. So until next time, stay healthy and have a great day and evening. Bye bye.
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 Thank you.
Bye bye.